What's up guys, Lifting Nerd here. Today's video is going to be a brief one. I will basically show you how to build up your currency and wealth using the Chaos Regal Orb recipe. I've mentioned this recipe in other videos as well, but since this is probably one of the absolute most important vendor recipes you should know of in Path of Exile, I decided to make a video dedicated specifically to this recipe, so that if you didn't know about this, you wouldn't miss it. Personally, I consider this one of the absolute best and easiest ways of making some currency without having to sell or trade items with other players if you don't want to. The way this recipe works is by you trading the vendor a full set of useless rare items, meaning one item for each equipable item slot, which is 10 items in total. So that means 2 rings, 1 amulet, 1 belt, 1 pair of gloves, 1 helmet, a body armor, 1 pair of boots, a weapon and a shield or some other kind of offhand, with the exception of quivers. To my knowledge, quivers do not work for this recipe. And as you can see, when offering the vendor this full set of items, he will in return give us 1 Chaos Orb. Pretty sweet for a bunch of rare items you would otherwise just sell for some transmute, alteration or alchemy shards. For this recipe to work, you need to make sure that all of the items are rare and at or above item level 60. Otherwise the recipe won't work. To check the item level of an item, click the item, and while it hovers on your mouse cursor like this, simply type /item level, and as you can see, the item level is now displayed in the chat window. Another way to do this is to install a macro, which can do this with one click as shown here. If you're interested in the macro, I will link to a video in the description on how to install these, and don't worry, it's pretty easy to do. If you instead trade the vendor a full set of unidentified items, he will give you 2 Chaos Orbs. And these items also needs to be at or exceed item level 60. If you identify the items, you do of course have the chance of stumbling on a potential powerful item that can be used by you or can be traded to other players for a good price. However, I know that some people prefer not to sell items or setting up a shop, but still like buying items from other people with the currency they earn or find. For that reason, selling the items unidentified to get the extra Chaos Orbs and then using those for buying items can be a good option. That way you won't have to sell items, but you still get a lot of Chaos Orbs that you can use to buy gear for your characters. And that really means that there's no best choice for this situation. It really comes down to which method you prefer to utilize for your specific goal or playstyle. Now, if you were to sell a full set of items above or at item level 75, as these items are, the vendor will instead offer you a Regal Orb. And if that wasn't enough, if these items were unidentified, you would receive 2 Regal Orbs. But at the moment I don't have a full set of unidentified item level 75 plus items, so you'll just have to trust me on the last one. But really, you would get 2 Regal Orbs. Anyway, when using these recipes, the items that you're going to find yourself needing the most for completing the item sets are belts, rings and amulets. A good rule to stick to is to dedicate a stash tab like this one for this specific recipe. And where you find yourself the required rings, belts and amulets for the recipe, put them in the stash tab and start picking up the remaining items for the recipe. By doing this, you will quickly find yourself with a full set of items that won't take up too much space in your stash, that can now be traded in for either 1 or 2 Chaos or Regal Orbs, depending on the item level of the items of course. Another strategy you may want to consider is to pick up white rings, belts and amulets, and then use an alchemy orb on these to turn them into rare identified items. By doing this, you have the chance of rolling yourself some good items of course, but if they instead turn out to suck, then you can use them for the Chaos or Regal Orb recipe. I personally do this all the time. I would advise you guys to only do this on the rings, belts and amulets with good implicit mods and rolls. In my experience, the 2-stone ring, coral ring, leather belt and either the onyx, turquoise, I think that's how it's pronounced, agate or citrine amulets are the best ones to spend an alchemy orb on. And the reason for this is that these items all have a useful implicit mod and are easier to sell to other players than their less useful cousins. The white items does of course also need to be at or above item level 60 or 75, depending on which currency item you wish to get in return before using an alchemy orb on them and turning them into rare items. And lastly, the best way to get a lot of these rare items for the Chaos recipe is to repeatedly kill Piety or Dominus. These bosses drops tons of rare items, and you will have no problem getting enough rare items for these recipes. For Regal Orbs you'll have to do maps, and the minimum level of a map you can do in order for you to find item level 75 items is maps at level 73. And that's because rare mobs have the chance of dropping items that is 2 levels above the zone level. That of course means that you won't find too many item level 75 items in a level 73 map or 74 map, but as soon as you reach maps that are at level 75 or above 75, you'll get yourself plenty of items above or at level 75 to use for the Regal Orb recipe. And that's it, guys. I know this is a short video, but I hope it was still informative and helpful for you new players to the game. If you aren't already, do yourself the favor and start using this recipe. Thank you for watching, and bros, do you even nerd?